Welcome to the adventures of self. Conversations with ordinary and extraordinary people as they explore what it means to be self-expressed. Come on in. Join the adventure. So, welcome, Phil Hulford, to the Adventures of Self.
Thank you very much for having me, Taylor.
It's a pleasure, brother. So, there's a lot I'd like to discuss, and I think maybe just as a way to get in, because we were talking right before we got started about some of the things that are coming up for us, and we had a moment of really being in presence, and I know it's something that you bring into your work, and we'll get into that. And what's interesting and beautiful is that sometimes people think that presence can be like, oh, I'm just going to this beautiful place, and everything's free and easy. And when you spoke, what came up for you was fear.
Yeah.
So maybe the thing to do is kind of like bring that out first and foremost. We'll deal with that, and then we can go to that beautiful place of rainbows and unicorns.
Thank you. Like you said, presence is something that I'm learning to cultivate, as everybody is. It's an ongoing thing because it's always now. But it's really important for what I do with movement and physicality, to be conscious of where you're at. But when we had this moment of stillness now, I was like letting go of all the things that I've had to do today and tomorrow and whenever. And I noticed that, I was feeling fear and anxiety over a few, maybe not even very specific things, but I recognized that there is a fear somewhere in me, which I can't always locate. And I find that quite frustrating. Like I feel it, particularly over, a couple of things come up now that I'm talking about it. Sharing my story, it's quite scary for me, because maybe as many people have this question of like, who cares? Who cares about my story? Other people's stories are far more interesting.
Try doing this every week.
Yeah. I suppose you get better at it.
Well, what I was sort of saying, it's like, gosh, these people have heard me talk every week. Aren't they getting bored by now? And maybe some are. I think it's really good. And sorry to, in a way, sorry to throw you in the deep end, but it's also something I think it's nice to just to kind of like dive in and see where we are in things, because it struck me as we started speaking that like we talk about presence, and there's as you say a growing appreciation of being mindful of where we are in something, and often there's a misconception that being mindful or being present means that we come to some still place where everything is beautiful and there's no worries. We're just at this calm, crystal clear center of a lake. And maybe that's true, maybe that happens, but also the reality that sometimes the first thing we notice is fear or anger or sadness, or some very, very human aspect to us. And what I like about just bringing it into the mix from the first moment is there's just an acknowledgement. Okay, yes, there's fear, and so what, right? We can be with that. We can acknowledge it, and move either past it, move with it. Keep it as the elephant in the room. Whatever we choose to do, but there's real power in just saying, okay, yes, there is fear.
Yeah, absolutely. Because when you acknowledge, then you know where you're at, and then you can oftentimes the path comes out, and I felt like I had to say that that's what I was feeling, because I knew that, yeah, that what you just said very well is that, yeah, when we acknowledge it, it's a really good stepping stone into then, yeah, continuing growing. And yeah, I think it was important for me to share that with you.
Cool, thanks, Phil. And I want to move it as a way to move into your own kind of career practice, lifelong work with movement. Because I'll tell you why I want to move into it, because like I'll let you actually start. Let me actually start by giving you an opportunity just to maybe introduce briefly like who you are, what you are doing in your personal and professional life in movement. There's a lot to uncover, but as a way to introduce the listeners in the first instance.
Yeah, sure. So I'm a performer. First and foremost, I started with performing, so acting and dancing, and it was from a very physical perspective. So my acting is much more of a physical nature, so less kind of straight acting and lines and that kind of stuff, more creatures and animals and that kind of stuff. So physically, the movement explores characters. And I also am very, 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 very interested in how to optimize health. And I'm a wild experimenter. I'm my own lab rat. I'll try everything from crazy nutrition programs to, really intense physical workouts and breath training, stuff like this, cold exposure. This is really exciting to me. So part of who I am is to explore movement as a way to heal the body, as a way to recirculate and recycle energy, so we don't waste it, but use it as a way to charge, and also to connect. It's really important for me. Like, movement is something I really think helps us to connect to that present moment, because just like the breath, when we're moving, it's not yesterday, it's not tomorrow, it's right now. You're moving now. So how does that relationship work? But the work I do is typically in theatre or in film. And as a coach, I work as a health coach, helping people to, master their health through physical training, breath work, and nutrition, stuff like that.
Cool, thanks. And there's a lot I want to come back to in that, but it's really helpful to hear, because and I'll tell you why I asked. We just met recently in the last couple of weeks, had a good connection, and I wanted to have you on the show. And we actually came together through men's work, which let's park for the moment and come back to. And as I was doing some research on you and what you do, you're very physical. You've been in, as you say, you've been in dance. You were in a professional dance called troupe for 10 years, I think, and have done a lot of film, theater, TV, as you say, in this very physical acting, as creatures, as animals, as these characters. And as a man who has done some physical work, but often maybe feels inadequate in my own sort of movement and living in, inner cities like New York, Tokyo, London, I'm not nearly as active in the physical world as I might like to be. And there is a sense sometimes, like when I it's like when I see somebody, I see a video of yours, or I see an Instagram post of yours, I think, this guy's so in his body, and so therefore, gosh, this must be how you overcome fear. That's why it came up for me, because this sense that in my own life, in my own practice, right, there are things that sort of frustrate me, or and I can feel that it's because of a physical limitation or hesitancy, and yet with your training, with your background, in some case here, the first thing that comes up is fear, not that you have to give in to that. And so I wonder how you talk about, or yeah, sort of deal with fear from the physical
Mm.
perspective.
Fear. It's interesting actually. Today I went to the sea. It's part of my practice to go to the. I live 10 minutes cycle from the beach, and I like to get in the water and feel the cold and just kind of. It's very healthy. But one of the things I've started to do recently is play with the ocean, and what I mean by that is um, kind of my own tai chi. Like
Mm,
I'll stand in front of the waves and just watch them, feel them, feel like there's all different the weather's always different, the sea is always different. Each day you come, it's like there's something different. And so today, today the tide, because we had a full moon recently, and the tide is so low. And in Brighton here, it's all rocks on the beach, but because it's so low, there was a spot of sand.
mm,
And for the first time, I decided really to get into movement, because on the stones it is much more challenging. And so I was in that space breathing, but so aware that there were loads of other people on the beach swimming, fishing, walking their dogs, whatever. And I could really sense that, like, when you see someone moving in the park, for example, curiosity, just you look. it's
mm,
it's not out of like judgment, it's just you look at movement, it's interesting. The eye catches movement too. But I was very aware, so that this very profound fear or shyness, I suppose it would manifest as a shyness, came up, and I was very aware. And I noticed that I kind of stopped the flow, but I was still moving because I'd committed. I'll be honest and say that I didn't completely overcome it this morning. However,
mm,
I was very aware of it, and the way I would deal with it is through breath. And
mhm,
like, I need to simplify it. When it comes to movement, it's if my breath is, if I'm focused on my breath and it's cohesive or it's connected, it it makes this and this, my body, connect. And then I have that mind body spirit connection.
mhm.
Whereas otherwise, if I'm just thinking about the people watching, what they think, how crazy I look on the beach doing these weird movements, because they're weird, I do some weird stuff. um, um, then it takes me out, and I notice my breath patterns all shift and change, and I become all this, like, yeah, this vibrating mess.
Mm. Yeah,
So the breath is key.
yeah, breath is key. I've been doing some breath work since the beginning of the year myself, some just kind of like morning Wim Hof breathing, and
Yeah, nice.
yeah, and it's really because I see how fear comes up, how quickly and easily fear comes up. Maybe because I didn't sleep well, or whatever it is, or my mind's distracted, and it's not about, like, for me, it's not necessarily about winning or holding my breath for X amount of time, although there is some aspect of that, because it's more that when I actually have that seamless, as you said, say mind body spirit connection, that holding an exhaled breath, with that technique, becomes quite effortless.
Mm.
Where when it's not, there are these moments. I actually noticed it this morning, because in Wim Hof, well, I mean, you can do different things, but he kind of introduces you to 3 sets of sort of breathing, and that by
Yeah.
the third time you should be holding your breath for the longest time, because you've kind of gone through this. And what I generally notice is that it's actually the second hold of breath
Mm.
that works best, or sort of for me, in the sense that I'm kind of in that realm, and I'm aware that there's this part of me that thinks, "Ooh, am I able to hold this breath? Is this normal? Is this safe? Am I going to die?" All the things that come up, and I hold that very well in the second one, and often it really starts to, like, it goes to one extreme or the other. There's sort of 30 seconds where in the third hold of breath, there's 30 seconds or more, I don't know, where I actually have no idea what's going on. I'm completely lost, and then somehow that pendulum swings back the other way. and I'm, I don't know if I've been in for 5 seconds or 2 minutes. I'm thinking, oh my God, I'm going to die. I need to do something about this. And I'm just much more aware of, and when I'm aware of that, I think what you're saying, it's like what I get from the connection I get is I'm sort of out of alignment because I'm too much in my mind, not enough in body and spirit, and then that all that stuff can come rushing in.
Yeah. Yeah, I do a lot of apnea work, training. I just started, like you said, you started this year with Wim Hof. I started doing apnea work, which is training to free dive, like one breath, go under the sea. Essentially, my goal is to fish. I want to hunt under the water, with a harpoon, like old-fashioned style. Just because I long for that connection, and that I like the silence under the water, but it also scares me. So I'm interested in conquering that fear. But I find that the second breath hold is typically the better one. And as you were speaking, I wondered whether it's because of that mental pressure that the third one should be better, should be longer. And so actually what happens is you waste energy, you waste oxygen using your mind. And it's completely true for me. That's why I would fail more on the third one, because I'm just, this one should be the better one. And I put too much pressure on myself.
Yeah. One thing I want to come back to, because you were talking about it earlier in terms of the movement that you work with, is this idea of energy, because in say breathing, right? Particularly if you are going to be free diving or diving for fish hunting or anything where there is potential serious physical risk. I mean, I'm doing Wim Hof lying down on the floor, so the worst I'll do is just kind of cough, gasp,
pass out.
Yeah, no, I guess I could pass out. Yes.
Have you passed out yet?
No, I've come very close.
Yeah.
And I know I haven't passed out. But one thing you said, you were talking about, in your introduction, you said something about how you like to experiment, to kind of take things to, like, you will use a lot of energy to understand how to use less. That, and then it's like there is this, like, you kind of have to do a lot of things to see how things work, maybe take yourself to an extreme, because then you can really pull it back and be within a recycled or a reduced energy state. And it's just like, I just find it to be it's a really interesting, because we think like, oh, I just have to save, and they talk about it like, you could talk about it for money or any energy, any resource. Sometimes you have to really put a lot out. You have to spend a lot to see where the savings are, whether that's energy or resource, time, or anything like that.
Yeah, interesting. This one is one I'm learning much more in depth now, that I've spent a lot of energy. I was a kid who had, undiagnosed ADD, like just go. My mum sent me to gymnastics when I was 4, and that was it. I was there 6 days a week, like just training hard until I was about 13. So that was my pattern. That was what I grew up with. So I kind of, all through my teens, 20s, and even early 30s, were very much fire heavy push. I came away from my dance career absolutely crippled with injury. I couldn't really walk up and down stairs without severe pain in my knees and in my lower back. Pulled a disc, tore rotator cuffs multiple times. I was a mess physically.
And is that because in your dance practice, I mean, I think this is true for a lot of dance practices, the sheer physicality of it, you're just pushing yourself day in, day out, further and further?
Yeah, that's part of it. That's definitely part of it. And the other part is my personal character, the way my mind was wired, less so now, was to, if you don't push that extra mile, if you don't do more than your peers, then you'll never get anywhere. You'll always be stuck at the bottom. And I took this away with me, and I would say 34 years of my life were very much that mindset, very much like I need to work really hard and beat everyone else. But it was also against myself, like I need to better myself all the time, relentless pursuit. And in the last 2 years, I'm 36 now. So in the last 2 years, I've really started to understand actually that is an important aspect to know. You've got to know how to work hard, and you've got to be willing to get yourself to do things that you don't want to do sometimes. But there's a very, very real balance to be found between the yin and the yang, between the relaxing or the resting and the pushing. And I think it took me 34 years to recognize that. It took me injuries to really see that that's not necessarily the most efficient or best way to grow. You might see some quick spurts of growth, but it was actually after a while started to drain my energy and specifically creative energy. I was not very open to create new things. So I had to stop and really slow down. Fasting helped me to learn that. Fasting from food, just drinking water for a while, and that helped me to just you get weak, so you can't do much, so you slow down. And but then I've been the opposite way as well. Since Christmas till around late January, sort of mid-February, not long ago, I went the opposite, because I recognized that I was coming back into this fire energy again. I was like, whoa, I don't like this space. It's not a good space to be. I could feel my body complaining at me again. So I slowed down and I started to practice more like meditative style movements. And actually that put me into a state of laziness. So it's a balance. It has to be found. It's really about balance.
Yeah. One thing you speak about, like that very yang, fiery, call it masculine or active energy. And we were talking about this in a men's group a little while ago, and one of the things that I think is kind of commonly seen and recognized is a lot of men really, really push, right? So either society has pushed them to something, or they feel that in themselves. And maybe there is, a very, like you said, right, at age 4, right, you were just raring to go. One of the things that I look at in the work I do is around archetypes, and bringing in mythological understanding, and looking at mythological archetypes like gods and goddesses that we all have within us. And Mars, or Ares, the god of war, the Roman or Greek god of war, right? He's often portrayed as this very fiery and belligerent personality, and we see that a lot in how masculinity is talked about, and you can see it in corporations and sports and all this. And I read a book that talked about the natural sensibility that comes from that, is that it has it's action for a sake of action, and actually getting, say, a child who is in that, has a lot of that energy, into something like dance or movement or acrobatics or something, is another way to actually channel that energy. And you were talking about how that was afforded you at a very early age, and you just went to it like a fish to water, and so had that as an outlet.
Yeah.
I've had people on the show that some of the people we have on the show, like myself, right, we would have done something, had one career or another career, and then had this real about face. Oh gosh, what am I doing? My ladder is against the wrong wall. I've been climbing one ladder of success, and it's against the wrong wall. And other people I know, right? They've kind of they've been in the same thing for, as long as they can remember. I mean, interestingly, we had a dancer on a month or so ago who also had started at a very early age, just knew that that's what she wanted to do, was be a dancer. So maybe it's the movement professions that know very, very early on. Yeah, I mean, can you imagine your life like without having this outlet? I mean, what would you be, right? I mean, because I know you spoke about like you grew up in Bolivia, so had access to outdoors and
Yeah,
running up trees and all that.
yeah. I think I'd be wild. I think I'd live in the wild. Like I'd really
Mm-hmm.
enjoy to be in the wilderness and learn to live completely off the land. You
Mm-hmm.
know, I'm really. I haven't had all that much opportunity to do that in my life because I've always lived in cities.
Mm.
But I've always had this, like you say, I grew up in Bolivia, and I had access to lots of nature, and I guess that's why, because when I was a kid, I would play army, like crawling in the dirt, like really in the wilderness. There was no one
Mm.
around, wild snakes and some pretty deadly scorpions around. My mom was okay, she just went, yeah, go for it, enjoy, like. But we would just have fun, and I remember those were among the best times of my life, where it was not there was no focus on time, there was no school, there was nothing to do. It was
Mm.
just explore and be. And so I reckon I would be somewhat wild.
Mm. Mm. Yeah, yeah. And what a luxury to have that freedom to explore as a small child, and to find your natural interest and talents and abilities.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, because kids do that. Like, so one of the things I train in is parkour, or free running, as some people know it.
Hmm.
And that is what, if people who are watching or listening don't know what that is, that's basically using obstacles around you to move from one spot to another. And there are two different forms. One is about speed or efficiency, getting from A to B as quickly as possible. And the other one is more expressive. So you use the environment to essentially dance.
Mm.
And so this is a really, really fun way to explore any terrain. But I think kids just do that. Like, it has a name now, but children, if you watch children and they see a wall, they'll jump straight on it and walk
Mm.
along, or they'll see physical challenges and just do them. Like, they don't have to be taught. They just enjoy the exploration of, can I do that? Can I do that? Can I do that? Testing their boundaries.
And you have two young boys. Is that what you recognize, just as an innate sense that they have, that curiosity and desire to?
100%.
Yeah.
Yeah, 100%. They itch to get on things and in things and through things and touch everything and throw stuff, and you know.
And what's your greatest learning or challenge in that? Because on one level, like you can play like anyone, right?
Yeah,
And yet you have a fatherly, parental duty to protect and to to protect and to hold space for them.
what was the question? What's the challenge?
Yeah,
Yeah,
in that, yeah, because I can imagine on one hand to be like, okay, let's just go play. It's like, oh right, you don't have the same strength, the same training, that all of this that comes with that.
yeah, yeah. Like you've observed it well. I get to play with them. So tag is not just touch the person and run away. It's it's now like, how can I use all the obstacles around me to put distance between you? How can I jump on
Mm,
top of? And like, I'm aware that they have less skill and less ability than me right now, and that's great actually, because it makes me I have to find different challenges for myself to make it fun. But they love it. Like, they could play that game all day long, and I can't. They can.
mm.
But I would say the biggest challenge is my boys are wild, just like I was. Really, and anyone who has, typically boys, there are girls like this too, but typically it's boys, young boys who are really, really full of fire energy, and they just have to splash it everywhere and go. My challenge is, how do I give, because we homeschool as well.
Mm-hmm.
And so how do I give them the feeling that they have total freedom, especially in a city environment where there are dangers, real dangers, glass, roads, people, needles in the park. There's all these kinds of obstacles. How do I allow my children to feel like they're completely free, but protect them? And so, yeah, I think one of the examples that comes to mind now is like crossing roads. It's not always push the button, wait for the green man. Like, that's what most parents actually teach their children, which is right, it's correct. But it's not the only time you can cross the road. Like, sometimes there is absolutely nothing coming and it's a red light for you and you could go. So what I like, to tell my kids is, wait for me to like be around because it's safe, but tell me when it's safe. Like, use your own eyes. Even if I cross, or if the dude next to you crosses, because there's a little space, don't follow him. Use your eyes. So I'm trying to just teach them that they have the ability to know when it's safe and know when it's dangerous, because it's already in them. But some, like, kids can often just wait for the right answer from an adult. And I want them to know that they actually do know, and they haven't got hit by a car yet.
I needed you around when I was a kid, because I got hit by a car when I was 10.
So did I.
Excellent. What comes to me is the sense of instilling awareness in children, and I think I don't have children, but I have met a lot of friends who do. And I know there's this tension around, like, oh, I just want to protect, right? Because of course you love your child, and as you say, right, they're not as aware or prepared to know what a needle is, or what a car is, or depending on how old. And so there is this tension between protecting, and instilling freedom, but freedom with awareness.
Yeah, that's big. Very big.
And as you're speaking about that, like, it takes me to the strapline you have for your business and the program you run, which is not about getting ready, but living ready. And I think that's really interesting. And so I'd love to you to speak to kind of like what that's about, where that comes from for you. Yeah.
I think the best way I can share about that is to tell you a story. Is that okay?
Yeah, of course. That's what we're here for. We love stories.
Great. So as I said, when I left dance, I left pretty crippled, like physically, like injured, and it was a prestigious dance company in London, and I was doing very well in the company. I really understood his work, and emotionally, I was really like, I was just I was good. If you had to compare, I was probably one of the best in the company.
And this is Hofesh Schechter, right?
That's it. Yeah, that's it. And so that sort of inflated my ego a lot. And I didn't realize, of course, because you're in it. But when I left, I was injured. And so naturally, I wasn't training. I didn't have the support of the company with the physios and the workouts and the nutrition side of things. I sort of was left alone without programming. And I very quickly spiraled into depression, because I wasn't getting any work. When auditions would come through, I would wildly fail at them because I wasn't ready, or I just, came in thinking, oh yeah, I got this. And then I wouldn't get it, and it would like really hit me emotionally. I would close. Like, I do this with my body, because I would close and I would come away and I would, be really upset, but I wouldn't talk to anybody about it. Not even my wife. Nobody knew about this depression I was in. My body got worse, and it was horrible. So One day I got offered a job to teach in LA for a week, just a small job teaching for Hulford, like his repertoire. And I'd reached a point, like a real, the biggest low of my life. I've never been in a bigger low. Like I was completely addicted to marijuana, like smoking all the time, and just wanting to escape. You know, alcohol was good, sugar was good, like everything was just working for me to like numb me. And I arrived to this little shack of a room, and which was amazing, right next to Venice Beach. And I just sat with myself for a minute, and I was like, I'm sick and tired of this injury. How can I just get better? Like, you know, I'd spent all my money as well previously, all of it, on physios trying to get like healing, you know. And most physios, they're great, but it's like a temporary fix. If you don't do the work after, you're not going to continue to get better. You can't just go there. It's not a magic pill, which I thought it was. So anyway, I typed into Google mind-body connection because I was convinced there was something missing. I don't know what led me to type this into Google, but I just did. And Wim Hof came up. He was one of the first things, and I was curious, so I clicked on it and I discovered, okay, there's this breath thing, so why not try it? Light up a big spliff and then do his breath work high, like really high, and then lay back on the bed like that, and then boom, this really, really strong feeling of clarity came, presence, what we've just been talking about. I was deeply aware of my current situation, my current feelings, my complete like lost feeling. I was so lost. And at the same time, I just felt this incredible warmth and love and kindness, like a voice, like God or something was just saying, it's okay. Like, it doesn't matter where you are loved and you're precious. And, you know, I put it down to the drugs at that point. But at the same time, like, I thought this is a very real, profound experience. And I woke up the next day and it didn't really go away. Like, it stayed with me into the next day and the next day. And then it started to just be this thing. And I started to discover that I can heal myself from within. And so I started to run, weirdly. My knees were the issue. And I'm coming to the end of the story. And I thought, why is this voice inside of me telling me to run? Because running is probably going to hurt me more. But I humbled myself. And I think that was the key for me, because my ego was so inflated. Like I needed to be brought back down to where I am now, which is injured. That's okay. I'm injured now. I am feeling emotionally vulnerable and weak, and I'm not getting the jobs that I want. I have no money. You know, it was like in a real poor state. So I started to run, but I just accepted that I'm going to run like someone who's never got off of a sofa and is, you know, like massively obese and just needs to get out and do stuff. So I ran like that, like I'd walk most of it and then slowly start running. But I decided that I resolved in myself that if I don't make a lifestyle change right now, this isn't a 9-week program couched to 5K, which is the one I did, by the way, which is a great app. If I don't make a lifestyle change right now, then my life is just going to be up and down, spiking constantly. And although I can feel like this sometimes, I want to have steady growth, and I want to be, you know, just growing. And so I committed to run every other day or whatever it was, taking rest, but just running. And I really improved. But over time, it wasn't as fast as I was used to. Then I started to see benefits, of course, and that one thing led to another, and nutrition and health like started to take over. But what I recognized was programs aren't going to change your life or my life. It's a decision to live as much of my potential as I can. And that's where I was like, do you know what? I don't want to get ready for jobs anymore. I don't want to hear that I've got an audition coming next week and then start to do push-ups and be, you know, ready. I want to expand my practice and enjoy the journey right now, because then when something comes up, I'm already ready. You know, I might have to learn some lines, but like physically and emotionally, I'm there, I'm ready.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah. And as you say, then you're just you're living ready, and not even just ready for a job or anything, but you're just living. You're in that life, and it goes back to, as you said, like the what we started speaking about at the beginning, this idea around presence. Because I know in my work, in my life, I can get very outside of where I am and think about all the things I didn't do yesterday, or think about all the things I, want to do, and have, I've got a list 5 pages long of all the things, and look at it and think, oh my God, I'm so behind. I'm so behind. And it can take me out of just the where I am, and actually creating, whatever it is that the thing is on the list. Maybe it's, recording a podcast, right? I can think about where, I mean, take this, right? I can think about where I would love this to be in 1 year or 10 years time. And that's a useful sort of, roadmap or sign. But if I don't give myself time to be here in this moment with you, to I can often think like, oh, what's the next question to ask as well. But again, it's just taking me
Mm.
out of being here. Like, I've had to really learn that in this um in this work, because I noticed there were a couple of episodes where I was already racing forward, thinking like, oh, is it time to go, should we move on to the next thing, rather than really allowing myself, and also allowing the guest to just, be in this moment. Like, it causes a lot of tension. I notice, right, that there's a lot in my life that I am constantly like, I can look back, on somebody. I just spent a lot of time in regret. And I don't know, when I made a shift into personal development, I think more goes now into the planning for tomorrow. I've come from more past oriented to more future oriented. And yeah, the opportunity is to just be here, because this is all we are. This is it.
Yeah, 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 that's it. Eckhart Tolle says something along the lines of, your perfect future is created now.
Mm,
Like, because if you're always thinking over there, then you're like never there.
yeah.
But if you're here, that will grow. So if you're present now, then that is the person that you're being, is your identity is here. Like, I'm here. So
Mm,
that is what goes into the future, and you create that, you manifest that.
yeah. And I think, like, because you were talking about in terms of fitness, or like a 5K goal, or whatever the thing is you have, there's what I've noticed is, there's this interesting dialogue, almost. It's a bit paradoxical, because on on the one hand, you do have a goal. There is something. It's like, oh, I would like to be able to run 5K, or I want to be able to um you know I don't know, like, lift this amount of weight, right? I mean, or I want to be able to um play tag with my kids for longer than 2 minutes without running out of breath, or whatever it is. Um, and so there is this kind of like, yes, I'd like to be there, but if that's all it is, you're kind of not where you are, and actually being in the present makes, I mean, paradoxically, it makes getting to that goal easier, and often it makes the goal um sort of like um not as important, because you actually, as you go through something, you realize, well, the goal was kind of a false thing to, yeah, it was a nice thing to kind of say, oh, that's the land I'm aiming for, like when I'm out at sea or something. But actually, I've found, as I get closer to it, there's someplace else that I'm actually already further than I thought I'd be, or I want to be somewhere else with it.
Mm.
I feel like that
Mm.
may have been a little confusing, but I know what I was trying to say. Uh,
Yeah, but goals, too rigid a goal can foster too rigid a mindset, like a fixed mindset, because
mm,
you're going for that. In breath work as well, holding your breath, if we aim for, say, 3 minutes, that's a very fixed target.
mm.
And you can, once you get to 3 minutes, you'll celebrate and pat yourself on the back, yeah, I did it. but then you enter empty space again, and you have to make a new one. But if the goal is to connect, then you might get to 3 minutes, you might get to 3.5, you might get to just 2 minutes, but you'll enjoy all of those 2 minutes. You're not going to be like, your body's not going to be screaming at you, holding on like, wait, 10 more seconds, 10 more seconds. You know what I mean? And so, yeah, I recently made a very profound decision in my life to just follow the joy. Like, I'm not interested in, I have goals. I have a vision, very clear. And it's something that pulls me towards it because it's exciting, but it's not fixed. Like, I'm very happy to go along on this journey. I mean, I get frustrated like everyone else, like, I'm not there now.
And when you're working with it, because I know you have a program that you call it the new normal, right? And what when you speak about it, it's like you start with yourself, which is one of the aspects of I think what we're doing here, the adventures of self. And you can start with yourself and then grow out from there. And it is about, like, yeah, what is the experience that you want? Because when you start from the experience you're creating right now, it will automatically, by its nature, create something different for tomorrow, the next day, after that, which is qualitatively different from thinking about where you want to go and kind of rushing through all these things. It's like, oh, I've got to do this, or write this many job applications to, or interview this number of people and lift this amount of weights, or it's like a qualitative experience rather than the quantitative things that you think you need to do to get there. And I just wanted to, because you were talking about it earlier, I'd like to just explore a bit about what I've seen from you recently on a lot of the Instagram stuff, because you were talking about how in the past, right, your acting is very physical, that your presence is very physical. It's very, as you call, creature, animal. And I know you've recently had a lot of posts around these sort of different creatures that you explore, and like there's a lot of play, and like there's a lot of specificity to each one that sometimes you're very in it, and sometimes you're kind of in it and then playing with things, whether it's with your sons or with yourself. I'd just like to kind of hear a bit, because it's kind of a microcosm, I think, to a lot of what you speak about.
The playfulness in the creatures. Yeah, so I sometimes, with social media, I don't know what to post sometimes, because when I look at stuff, it's either like, inspirational, motivational, information, knowledge, that kind of thing. And although that's great, and I can offer some of that too, I'm me, so I'm going to do what I do. I'm going to do what I enjoy. I'm a performer as well. Like, there's no stages open right now, so like Instagram and Facebook, they're my stage. And so I set myself little challenges, and that particular one was, for all the 28 days of February, I'm just going to explore a different creature. Partly that is to practice, partly that is to perform, and partly that is to play and to sort of build my understanding of my body when I'm moving in a way I've not really moved before. And so, yeah, I really want to work in film more, because I really love the idea of creating a character that really comes to life. So often when I watch films, I'm quite disappointed with the physicality of like some of the movement I see, and I'm often left with, oh man, I could do that better. Like, I want to do it, give me the chance. And so part of it is just to create my own chance, to play around. What can I create? What can I do now? I'm giving this excuse that I'm not getting this chance, but okay, what am I doing? So I started to play around. And I noticed that my children really love it. They like to act. Like, kids love role play. They love it when they like to play Pokemon. There's a card game. So when they're not playing the card game or watching the show, they'll play it like this. They'll do this attack, and then I'll breathe on you with fire. And they do all this stuff. And they're into it naturally. And so that spurs me on. And that was that's like as simple as it is.
Yeah.
It's just fun.
Yeah. It's beautiful. You got such a great energy of, like, I love how you've embodied, this kind of your own childhood fire, and just kind of grown into that. And, as you said, like, had your challenge, right? Gone through the inevitable pain and injury that comes from pushing oneself, and created your own new normal with that, and a willingness, a desire to lead others in that.
Yeah.
Cool. And I thought maybe, because it's kind of what brought us together, was maybe just spend a little bit of time talking about men's work, which, sometimes, like, I was talking to a friend recently about almost the like the hidden nature, right? Like, it's become this sort of like weird, kind of secret society thing. It's like, oh, we do men's work. And it because even as a man, sometimes I'm not sure what men's work is, but it kind of has this name, it has this label. Men gather, talk about men things, or whatever, and that's, and that's work or something. So I'm just curious, like, what brought you to that work, and maybe we can, sort of lift a little bit for listeners, particularly women, or anybody who hasn't had an experience with that, of what we get from it, what brings us to that, what's the challenge in it.
Yeah. Taylor, I think you have much more experience than me in men's work, men's groups. It's fairly fresh to me. I grew up as in a Christian missionary organization, and one of the things that they encouraged there was accountability, which I encourage avidly. Like, it's very important to have someone you're accountable to, for all things, your goals, your relationship, all of it. It's great. But they were talking more specifically about men, and it in the Christian circle, which I was in when I was a kid. It was a lot to do with sexual energy, like, managing your sexual feelings and not to sin, essentially, whatever that means. And so that was my first kind of experience of men's groups. It was 1-to-1, or like, 3 or 4 boys with a leader who's a guy, like, just sort of talking to us. And now the men's work I've got involved in is just conversation. It's just conversation. And it's conversation which is a lot focused on emotion, lots of talking about how we're feeling, the things that we're struggling with, but also talking about, like, wins and what makes us feel strong. I think those are the kinds of typical things that I've come across in this kind of work. And the only thing I've noticed is that women have these groups naturally, because typically women have a much more natural access to discuss how they're feeling, their emotions. They contact each other when they're upset, typically. Again, this is just generalizing. And men don't. Men, like me, held it in, even from their wives, from their best friends, everything. Just, I can deal with this. I'm strong. I've got this. I know how to run my life. I'm going to get over this. And actually, sometimes you just need to break down and go, I don't got this. And that's what men's groups are for, I think. for me at least.
Yeah, yeah. Thanks, Phil. Yeah, I can relate to a lot of that, and um, I think that one of the things that is missing in our modern society is the availability of boys to have open discussions about what it means as we go from one age to the next, as we go from one stage of our life to the next, that there really is very little in modern society, if much of anything, that provides a space for that.
Mm.
I know that you can find that sometimes in sports, although often there's such a competitive nature that there's not a real opportunity to just own things as they are. And it's really interesting, to hear that, like in your upbringing, that there are in some religious settings an opportunity for boys to talk to men about what's there. I mean, I remember I was in Boy Scouts in the U.S., but we didn't really discuss things like that. It still had that very, a lot of. There were a couple of older, young men or older boys that did some mentoring that
Mm.
I am grateful for. But a lot of it was, very much in, okay, if you put something out into a circle of men or a group, man, everybody else latches onto that, and that kind of becomes, it's like, okay, now we know what your weakness is, and we're going to exploit that. And and yeah, like the the opportunity for men and men's work is often to simply have a place to be heard and be seen,
Yeah.
without judgment, and oftentimes there's not even really a need to discuss what went bad, or to really get into it. It's simply an environment to voice something and to be witnessed.
Mm. To be witnessed, yeah, it's a very good word. To be witnessed, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there's so much in our modern society, as you say, like we hold things in. I recognize in myself. I mean, I grew up with just my mom. My parents were divorced when I was very young, so I didn't have a father figure around. Didn't have older siblings. It was just me and my mom. And I, I had a very good relationship with her, and maybe got quite comfortable discussing things, and being open about things. But I was reflecting on this recently, that in a lot of the relationships I had growing up, my teens, my 20s into my 30s, I would often have one, maybe two boys or men who were close friends, but I had to, like, really, really know that I could trust them before I could speak to them about things. And as you say, there were definitely things that I did not discuss.
Mm.
And only when I started doing men's work did I feel comfortable, being much more open with lots of men, because I think I looked to men as, it was my own projection, it was my own assumption that they were judging me, that they were better than me. I would see somebody like you, a very physical man, and think I'm a lesser man. So I would go into judgment and think, well, he must not be very smart or sensitive, or all the things that would justify why I would feel okay about not sharing or being open. And in the work I've done, I mean, it's really been beautiful, because one of the things that that I love from men's work is that it opens up the universality of the experience. It's why I like archetypes, and these sort of like mythic aspects, because we are all of these things. We all have, whether we're living through that physicality, or whether we're living through our emotions, or intellect. We all have those things to
Yeah.
one degree or another, and to see how we deal with that, to see the wins we have, and the struggles we have in it, is beautiful because it takes away the loneliness in that.
Yeah, and that's it. It's a vulnerability. It's a place to be vulnerable safely,
Mm,
um, and that's vulnerability is a key to the depth of relationship. You know, I would say, again, here I'm being super honest, I would say my relationship with my wife is not as deep as I'd like it to be,
mm,
because I still have this tendency to hold things and think that I can deal with them, emotional
mm,
things. Like, I'm honest with her, I don't lie to her, you know, I'm very, I don't keep things from her intentionally, but it's more like if there's it's unconscious. So
mm, mm, mm,
it's coming to this awareness. But this space of being vulnerable with each other in men's groups, particularly, or you know, husband and wife, or whatever relationships you're in, like that's the key to depth is to be vulnerable and just be open and go, you know, I don't always have it under control, or maybe now I really do have it under control, but you don't. So
mm.
let me support you. I'm
Yeah,
strong
yeah.
to be useful. That's why, again, coming back to parkour, that's the parkour motto: be strong to be useful. And
Mm.
so if you're strong, you be useful. If you're not, share it with someone who is.
Yeah, and I think there is something um, in many men, not to generalize, but in different ways, that sense of strength, and it is, I really do believe that it's there are propensities of energy rather than looking at men or women or male or female, that I've kind of been trying to get away from sort of masculine
Yeah.
and feminine energies because I feel like they're quite loaded, particularly nowadays. And so, although we don't have the cultural um, background or reference of say yin and yang, I think most people recognize those as symbols, and I've talked about them on several episodes here because they are completely complementary. You cannot have one without the other. Neither
Yeah.
one is better. Neither one is worse. It has nothing to do with value. It is simply recognizing that there are different propensities. It's like energy will do certain things, just like the inhalation of a breath is different from the exhalation of a breath. That doesn't mean that all you should be doing is inhaling, right? Like that would be rather challenging and
I used to try that.
yeah, exactly. Well, I think I'm full now. I get just a little bit more in. And similarly, like you can't just exhale, right? And like we have this, like people see what they call like results. There's this kind of like there's I see the physical results of pushing my body. It kind of goes with back you were saying in terms of like you can push your body to the extreme, but what is the cost of that unless you are listening to what's
Yeah.
happening, unless you are receiving something, unless you are, having a moment to pause, to be in something rather than always doing. And it's that that is interesting about, you were talking about balance, right? That's what is so I think what's so beautiful about a lot of men's work is because a lot of men come to things and they're used to just pushing, and when they can you know share something, and as we were talking about, be witnessed, right? Witnessing is a sort of active listening, right? It is a receptive mode, not to fix, not to overcome, not to do these other things. It it allows a space for balance to emerge.
Mm. Balance is my word for 2021.
Nice. Um and yeah, what's in what way How do you see that playing out for your 2021? Why did that come to that? What does
Because
balance mean?
yeah, it's because of my unawareness to how, I would be so goal orientated that I would push, and it would again be unbalance me, and then I would get sick.
Mm,
In my mind, I would get physically. I haven't been sick in a very long time, which is awesome. I can't remember the last time I was sick. But unbalanced for me, it's just about being aware. How I
mhm,
train physically, the kinds of things that I read, balance between, how much I'm working and playing with my family, or spending time with people I care about. All of these kinds of things, they all require some kind of a balance. If I do too much relaxing, I'm gonna get sick all week. If I do too much pushing, so that's how I see
mm,
it playing out. I see it as a presence thing, as a check-in. Am I now? Am I going to be pushing more? Is it time to push? Yesterday, I had a reminder. You got to push more. It's time to fire up, because over the winter, I allowed winter to kind of sit with me more and be
mm,
much more peaceful and relaxed.
mm,
And that was great. But yesterday, I really felt like, okay, you're entering a new season now. So the
mhm,
balance of that is put a bit more effort into the things
mm,
that we do. So I listened, and I feel great because of it. Ultimately, it helps me feel connected.
mhm. Yeah, I love what you're saying, because it really reminds me of what I've been focused on over the last few years in my own life, of moving with the seasons. I read a while ago that, I don't know, it was like the diary of like a 19th century farmer who said that, obviously a farmer would spend a, a lot of time out in the fields in summer and fall, or from spring into summer and fall, make hay while the sun shines, right?
Yeah.
And the physical requirement, to do all that, and that apparently it was fairly common to essentially hibernate, like literally hibernate, so that people would, for December, January, February, whatever it is, they'd be sleeping 20 hours a day.
Wow.
Because that's what that's what everybody does, right? That's what the trees do. That's what that's what the bears do.
Yeah.
That's we go within. We go to that quiet point, and in our world today, oh, I got to get up at 6 a.m. and check my emails and do this and do that, and I fall into that. I know it well.
Yeah. Yeah.
And when I really have learned, or taught myself, or recognized that I work better, like you're saying, you know, December, January, February, just like, okay, what are the, I wrote an article about this recently, because I was doing some gardening, and how, the land that we till for ourselves, the land that we prepare for ourselves in the winter months, right? Where we may be taking out some weeds, we might be doing some some work to really allow. It's like, what are the seeds that are going to, we're starting to plant seeds now. We're moving into spring. The sun's coming up. We can feel the heat. So what seeds are we planting? Rather than assuming, it's like we have this assumption that if I plant a seed today, well, it's got to bear fruit tomorrow.
Hmm.
It's like, well, that doesn't that's anti-natural, right? It's out of balance. It's out of
Yeah.
rhythm. It's out of cycle, because the seed has to go through the sprouting and the flowering before you get the fruit. And some seeds will not bear fruit because they'll die. And other things, you can plant things in the garden, and all of a sudden something else comes up, and you say, where did this thing come from? This amazing, or maybe noxious thing that comes up. And to be aware of all the things that are coming up that were planned and unplanned.
Hmm. Yeah. I love those. I love nature analogies like that. Seed
Mm.
and growth. They're always very comforting.
I saw in Yeah, in your one of your Instagram posts, you were speaking about nature, and I really loved what you said, which is sometimes I don't know what I'm learning.
Yeah. Yeah.
Exactly. Um, and we don't need to know.
No, no. There's always going to be a mystery.
Hmm.
And if there isn't a mystery, then it's a little boring.
Mm. Cool. Thanks, Phil. I've really enjoyed this conversation
Me
this
too.
afternoon. It's had a really good flow, and I'm happy to say that sometimes, sometimes more often than not, I don't know what I'm learning.
I'm happy to say that too, Taylor.
Thanks, brother.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks for listening. If you like what you heard, go on, be adventurous. Click the subscribe button. And join us next week for a new adventure. Until then,